Creating the whole bill of materials. Um, I guess, I have a visual of what I think it is, but when I walk over and see it on the line and see what they're doing, it can vary. It can be different than what I thought it was going to be, and all those costs reflect to you guys. And I'll just use an example. We did a special tri-wall bin John Gold, no, it was Ambrosia project at Chelan Fruit on C line, and what I envisioned and what really started ended up changing kind of rapidly when you get real life hands and you start doing it and you see what the packaging has to be. We changed volume and changed packaging literally on the go. Developing all of this ahead of time and having it available in the system ahead of time, I'm a little bit nervous about that because of that variability of real life.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of packaging. The stuff that we use the most, the volume stuff, that's the stuff that I think can be set up. All the Walmart packages that we use every week, all the Kroger stuff we use every week, all the tray packs and bags that we use all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have a pretty firm meeting about standardization of what those are going to be, because right now it's kind of a little bit loose.
Okay.
Maybe a lot of bit loose, depending on how you're. And I would say this: it would be, for instance, one warehouse might be packing the Trout label 3-pound bags for Walmart, and you go to another warehouse and they're packing Chelan Fresh 3-pound bags for Walmart. That has not been firmly laid out and line drawn in the sand. Then, of course, you've got a potential packaging, labeling change going on now to try and actually combine the Chelan Fresh / Trout labels onto some kind of a package or label that looks the same all the time.
Right.
So a little bit of
stickering here, and you would quick lock.
Yeah. So bags. That's
the same exact package.
Yeah. So
is that the one for the Canadian market we were talking about before? No.
Yeah.
Really.
That's the way the bags are put together.
Right.
The
We use
Gebbers.
foam pads and we use paper pads.
Right. Well, like anything else that you guys have undertaken over the last 4 years, when you put something into the system, it's pretty unforgiving in regard to. I mean, it truly, and it needs to be, and it should be. I mean, so that we can lock down costs and lock down expectations, lock down bill of materials in this particular case. So if that has to end up being 2 bill of materials, I guess that's okay in the long run. But we don't want that if we can avoid
There
it.
is an effort to try and get it all standardized so that it gets back to one only.
Right.
But still, there's real life at each warehouse may not
Sure.
have the capability to do. You guys prefer to do stickers as opposed to clips.
Right.
And so that may be, maybe you guys say, okay, we're going to go to clips. And that's a whole nother internal decision that you would make. It requires some logistics and people, some machinery.
Sure. Well, you mentioned just a moment ago, you said use the word project with regards to this new packaging. I mean, is that something that you see as a long-term finished goods product, or is it a one-off for the season or something?
Well, I don't know when it's going to finally be decided,
right?
But it's in, it's being discussed at kind of a marketing development level, and it's going to have to go to board level to get final approval.
Okay.
And it's not close at all.
Okay.
So Stan, would this be a good time to kind of back up and talk about roles and how it all fits and flows?
Absolutely.
Because one of the things that makes this subject really difficult is we all have a picture of the real world we live in today, and we may not have as good of understanding of what it might be tomorrow with a bill of material and a different process in place of how the responsibilities could be sliced differently. Because it really, the way I look at it is, if we take the system and we try to use the ERP process to kind of its maximum, then it allows us to maybe specialize some of the activities more so that it's more focused, so you have time to to be more detailed around very specific things. And I made some charts to kind of help show that and to kind of lay that out. In the sorry, Ken, it's going to be behind you.
I might be able to put this up on the screen too.
The ERP system, I mean, the goal is to kind of have or be a Class A ERP, right? I mean, be first rate and utilize the system or the processes the way they were intended or designed. All of this information about the ERP really comes from APICS, which is the Society of Professional. I mean, it's an engineering organization that was designed or organized or created about 40 or 50 years ago, really around manufacturing. But it's fundamentally, as they started scheduling and planning their production and their activities, they kind of developed rules and processes around what makes it work or what makes it more efficient. At the end of the day,
Sorry, Sam. Kathy, we're looking at the email pictures that I sent to you.
Yeah, and we displayed it on the go-to meeting and enlarged it, so we can
Oh,
see a very good thing.
Sweet. Sorry, I forgot about that.
at the end of the day, we start with a sales and operations plan, and Ken, that's kind of our the big spreadsheet we have today. That's the team's input. And when I say team, it's it's Rick and Johnny and Kenny, and everybody gets together every couple of weeks and they decide how much of what we're going to do over the next 2 or 3 weeks or month, and that changes or is adjusted every couple of weeks or looked at every couple of weeks. But those basic inputs would feed into a function in ERP terms that would be called master scheduling. And the master scheduler is the person or the group that's responsible for really taking firm requirements or stuff that you need to make, or forecasted requirements, stuff you think you need to make, and you build a schedule, and it's really basically your drumbeat or your timeline that then gets distributed to all the different people who are making stuff. That says, I need this many of these things. So it's really about what I need and when I need it. And that becomes, one focus of just a person or a group of people. And kind of the thought is that's got to come from CFM because it's got to coordinate. It's the conductor that's coordinating. This is what's going on at CFM or at CFC. This is what's going on at Gold Digger. This is what's going on at any of the packing facilities. So it's defining what and when at I would say at a 5,000 to 10,000 foot level. It's not.
Yeah, we talked about this, not at the SKU level at this
That's
stage.
at volume and
Right.
variety.
Right.
So we're going to pack 20,000 reds this week. That's the plan.
Right, and we may have to go we may have to go below just red because you need to know E2Ls. You got to get to a low enough level that it's meaningful to this production planner, which is the next function I'll talk about. This is the guy who lives right now in the next day or two. How am I going to organize what's going on the line to accomplish what the schedule says I have to accomplish? And so it's got to be a low enough level of detail that they know what you want when they look at the list. But this production planner is the person who's going to take it and say, okay, I've got these rooms of fruit open, I've got these shifts, I've got these constraints. Here's how I'm going to massage it so that by Wednesday I can have the reds for Walmart or the grannies for this order. So when I think about the responsibilities, I think of it. The plan is usually a number of weeks, so I'm looking, I'll say 3 to 6 weeks ahead, but it's by day, so I'm looking out weeks ahead, and when I'm working on this plan, if it's really working, the master scheduler is not working in the week I'm in today. I'm working next week's requirements or 2 weeks out. The production planner is working days to hours, and he's really working in the week I'm in right now.
So who does what now? Because
So today what happens is we go kind of from this box straight down to here, because we go here and then we have an idea of what we want and what we need based on the meeting. And then you go out and give Jared and Bryce instructions, and they start writing detailed instructions for the warehouse.
Not weeks in advance.
No, it's happening daily.
Right.
You're changing that course every day. There really isn't. This step is kind of merged together, and it flows right to here. And I think that when you send it out, or when we send what we send out today, doesn't go straight to the line. It goes to usually an intermediary. So it'll go to, at Gebber's, it goes to Troy, and then Troy will put his spin on whatever is going to happen, and Jared and Troy kind of pass something on to the line, right? And I'm not sure who it is at Jacqueline. So what Bryce writes goes to Jacqueline, and then it gets split up, and I don't know what gets added or what gets changed, but you know, things.
So they're somewhere in the middle or
Right.
down on that.
So in the ERP system, when we talk about these changes, this becomes a function, and suddenly there becomes a list of activities within the system that becomes the responsibility of the production planner, so that the ERP system's loaded up. So for example, today, the way we are using the ERP system, the pallet ticket creation is where the inventory begins. So at pallet tickets, anything can happen based on what the pallet ticker puts in. With a true Class A ERP system, the detailed plan is what would limit the pallet tickets. So now pallet ticketers would not be able to just build any pallet ticket with any combination. They could only build pallet tickets that had a detailed plan that matched what they needed. So you eliminate all of that variability, and you consolidate a lot of that decision making that happens today at the pallet ticket step with this person who's putting the detailed plan together. And that's all controlled within the ERP system. So now, as a pallet ticketer, I don't have as many choices to make. I'm picking off of a predefined list that the planner has determined. These are the things we're going to do today. And there's a suite of things, and they're making those hourly or daily adjustments based on this preset plan or predetermined plan.
And that also gives sales visibility weeks in advance.
Exactly. So the other thing that happens is when we add this detailed planning step now, we can turn that on, Ken, so that you can start to see that on your available for sale screen. So now on my available for sale screen, the salesman can see what the plan is to make today. So now it starts to change the expectation of the salesman, because I'm not guessing about what I'm going to make today. I'm going to look at what they said they're going to make. And then in real time, I'll be able to see as it goes from the forecast to what was really made. So that then I can start to get the feel for, okay, are they really making as many as they thought they were going to make? How's it flow? How's it flowing and within the creation process of that actual inventory? So it changes the dynamic of the world we live in today. So this is kind of the what to make when, high level, lower level, ultimately feeding to the warehouse. There's this whole other branch, which is kind of what we're here to talk about today, which is the materials requirement planning. And essentially the whole concept of the MRP process is that, at some level we have at CFM, I'll call it a procurement coordinator or the enterprise execution. And we kind of tried to do this when Casey was here a little bit, but the idea is the role at CFM is getting the system set up right, so bill of material and all of the recipes are in there, the item masters are all lined up, so the system is ready to go to make the package it needs to make. So the focus here is on what should the finished package look like. So, whatever standardized coating we have on it, the printing, it's the finished package that the focus is. And then it goes one step farther in that it's coordinating within the enterprise. So let's say we're going to buy, we figured out our economic order quantities, and we say we could buy, should we buy bags in lots of 5,000 or 1,000,000? And what are the trade-offs? And we figure out what's the best way to get cost out of the process. Should we have one standard box that, we put a blanket order in as a big enterprise, and then everybody orders their unique piece, their piece to get the volume discount? And I know Casey worked on some of that kind of stuff, getting the volume discounts on some of the standard use items across the enterprise.
Who's Casey?
Casey Collins was someone who used to work at CFM, and he did some package coordinating. He works for a box company now. I mean, that was his his baby.
But right now, none of that mass buying at the enterprise level is taking place.
No, I think there's some
We have
box
pretty good
coordination discounts that we're getting, where we've negotiated. Hey, there's 3 organizations and they buy 10 million a year. Give us a better price than if every organization went there individually and only bought 3 million each.
Reggie and Johnny are,
Working on.
they discuss it and then they sign a contract with Boise.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's where we are right now.
Individually, not jointly.
They sign a contract individually?
Last time they did it
Oh,
jointly.
yeah.
Last time they did it jointly. This time they may do it individually, but they kind of coordinate their negotiations.
Uh-huh.
So the reason that I put 2 boxes here is because there's a coordination aspect that happens as a whole, but the purchasing and reordering is really a shipper responsibility, because the shipper's deciding this is what I need to make whatever this plan is. But it doesn't mean that we can't have a consolidated approach, so that we're, we go out and we work in advance on purchasing, or we work in advance on standardizing package types, so we don't have 3 different bills of material. Where we have one. Again, trying to simplify. And at the end of the day, the challenge here for Ken or Ken's team is that our customers expect a uniform package. So when Walmart buys apples from CFN, they really don't care where it gets packaged, but they expect that they're going to look the same on the shelf. We can't have 3-pound bags coming from 3 different suppliers that look totally different. So they get mixed on the shelf, and then there's a presence on the shelf that looks shoddy because it doesn't look like it came from the same place. In a nutshell, that's why this role becomes so important, because it's buying things smart. It's getting the right quantities at the right times at the right price, making it or working at keeping it uniform and consistent. At the end of the day, it's all being done to improve customer service and satisfaction, both internally and externally. The other pieces of this process that are relevant, truck scheduling and logistics on the side here, is really dependent whether they're supporting shipping or they're getting the packaging information. They're trying to coordinate to get the right fruit to the right dock at the right time for that truck that's showing up. Just like the warehouse is trying to get the right fruit in the right box at the right time, so that it's ready. So it all plays together and it all comes together. But ultimately, the system's designed to help execute those in an organized or structured way. And what happens is we end up with these new roles. So we don't tend to think about them this way today, but master scheduling, how much and when, it's kind of the pace setting or the allocation, if you will, of the sales orders. Then we have production planning, which is, you know, where and how much to make today and tomorrow by line, kind of that detailed focus. We have the material manager or planner, which is really defines the controls of how we finish the package, how the finished package looks, coordinates the group purchasing, system setup, and any packaging exceptions. So I know a lot of Ken's time revolves around, we bought too many of these and we need to use them up, or we're not quite ready to switch over, can I or can't I? So this group is a group that would work with sales and customers to figure out, okay, here's how we manage obsolete inventory to kind of use it up where we can and to try to get rid of it. But it's got to be done in a coordinated way. It can't just be, well, we're out of NFL bags, use those, and then find out that, you know, Kroger won't take them. The material coordinator, again, is doing the stocking, the shipper managed supplies for packaging. Inventory control is really about data accuracy in the system. One of the things I didn't mention over here on this chart is the whole system and all of the information that's in the system. With an ERP system, suddenly everybody's relying on all that data to make their decisions. So this guy's scheduling, is looking in the system at the data and deciding what I should be scheduling for tomorrow. Am I on plan? Am I off plan? If we don't follow reliable processes in the warehouse or in the sales office or anywhere where they touch the system, it's going to put bad data into the system. Bad data in the system will drive wrong decisions about how much of what to pack when and where. So data accuracy becomes really important. That's where inventory control comes in, because they would be checking and verifying that the, you know, an example I'll use is the allocating orders versus staging them. So if we've got a bunch of stuff allocated that hasn't shipped, it's going to look to this guy like, I've got orders and no fruit. So he would say, I got to hurry and pack some more. Well, the inventory control guys would be looking at that stuff and making sure that the information is accurate and right and that we're making the right decisions. They also provide a role in providing management with visibility of how things are flowing and where the problems are at in the process. And then the third area is expedite. So today we live in a world where every job is like an expedited job. It's a one-off, hurry up, I got to get this done. Everyone knows that if, you know, Kenny knows that if he needs to get something through, they're going to call the line and they're going to camp on the line because they got a truck waiting. There's a known way today to expedite or hurry things through a process. In the future, you would have a group or an individual that was responsible for that, and they would kind of prioritize and coordinate how things get expedited on any particular line or any particular plan. Truck scheduling and logistics, again, the truck, the fruit at the right time and place. Shipping is the right fruit on the right truck, and the warehouse is the right fruit in the right box at the right time. So it starts to give us a way to break things down and write requirements or processes. How do we define our standard operating procedures in each of these areas to ensure that we have a reliable method to do that? Which is kind of the last piece, which is, you know, how would you propose to go about doing some of this kind of stuff? The first thing is getting the right people in the room so that we have the logical work groups. So as an example, this is kind of a subset of the right work group for the materials manager piece. So once you get the right team together kind of by function, you can start to develop some sequences of, okay, here are the things that would need to change, here are the pieces, the moving pieces that need to be organized or thought about differently. Drafting of the operating procedures about, okay, in the new world, this is the way we're going to order material, or the way we're going to do POs, or the way we're going to name things. So you break those pieces down and you start to define them. We have a new I-Series coming to update our old I-Series. The way we've budgeted it, we're going to be keeping the old I-Series and licensing it as a test environment. So the plan is to take the old box and set up the test environment the way we think this should work in the future, where we can turn all the stuff on and actually use it to kind of sort out how the software works and figure out all of the bells and whistles in the test environment. So the idea is you get it set up on the test box, and then we can use that for training people and validating the SOPs and processes so that we can go in a very structured way and a very logical way without risking production. Once we have validated the SOPs and have the core people trained, we can come in, we can work with Cognos and our dashboards and make sure that we got the right reports and visibility synced with the new processes. And then at that point, we can kind of develop a cutover plan or a phase plan. Because the trick is, how do you make a change this big that affects the whole enterprise in a way that you don't stop packing apples? Because we got to keep packing apples. So finding that right time and getting everybody trained and synchronizing our watches to do it, that's kind of the proposal for how we would skin the elephant. That makes sense?
I'm bought. I'm sold, rather. No.
Yeah.
And there are some, fundamental shifts in the way that CFM is going to have to conduct themselves, I guess, for lack of a better term, and the production facilities.
Right. It's the
Sure.
whole. That's why the SOPs are so important, because it's both sides. As an example, if let's say it's CFM's responsibility to drive this high-level plan. If suddenly CFM is only saying, we need these SKUs on these days, and you're going to give me this many a week of these things. If the detailed production planning becomes the warehouse's responsibility, then that means someone in the warehouse has to sit down and figure out the plan of, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to put it all together? And then know with certainty that all the orders are going to be filled, because we can't have customers not get fruit. So it's a really different way of thinking about how the work flows through the whole process, and it's a big change and it's scary. Not wrong, just different. So everybody involved, from sales to the line supervisor, has to understand and buy into what their new roles and responsibilities are, and understand what the consequences of inaction or lack of decision, or because we can't not ship fruit to Walmart. That's not an option, in case anyone's wondering.
Okay.
Right? I mean, everybody knows that. But when you change, those are the kinds of things, something slips through the cracks, and suddenly there's not a load ready for Walmart. That's the real world. I've seen this many times with these kinds of changes. So it really, that's the nice thing about having a system we can set up in the test, where we can actually go through and figure out what the scanning's like, and how does it really flow, and what information can you really get or not get out of the system. The hard part is the people you need to help set up the new system and figure it out are smart people, and they're really busy today just trying to get their daily jobs done. So how do you balance the time to have the time to figure out this new, better way and keep things moving in the warehouse today that's got to keep moving?
Right now, the production process can change and does change all the way down to the butchers of the world out in the packing line. And that's real world. But regardless of what we do, that's at some level still going to continue to happen, and should be able to continue to happen. But we want to be able to minimize as much of that as possible, because we have a plan in which they were a part of the planning process, whereas maybe they're not today. Again, does the team structure have to change, or do job responsibilities have to change, and et cetera. So.
But to maximize or leverage the power of the ERP,
Right.
Those rules have to be looked at and understood,
Right.
And those operating procedures have to be developed and challenged until everybody's comfortable that they're the right way to make the work flow through the system.
Kathy and Troops, you still there?
We're here.
Okay. Generic question as far as Sam's terminology, which is the master production scheduler and or a master production schedule. We talk about having something that potentially could be 6 weeks out, but almost by definition is never going to be at the SKU level. Any kind of thought process, recommendation, whatever, how can we create a master schedule that's 6 weeks out or so without being all the way to the SKU level? Without creating additional items in the item master file, let's say.
Yeah, we have to come up with a way for you to enter that. I'm trying to think of what we have in the system now that may allow you to do that at a higher level.
Right.
I know we have some stuff in farm management, but I think that's more related to delivering product from the field. This would be product you already have in your facility after it's been received, and it may just be sitting, in a room somewhere, and you
Right.
actually create this master schedule.
Right.
Variety of week. Kind of talking out loud. If we don't have anything in the system now for that, which I'm not thinking of right at the moment, we have to create a screen allow you to enter that.
Right. I'm kind of thinking of staying with this thought process, Sam. That's something that would almost be a requirement. How are you going to have a master schedule without some kind of and keying input screen? Something.
Does Sunkiss not have some kind of a master scheduling process in there? I thought I remember seeing something where they had but I know they had a production forecast that interacted, but I thought they had kind of a master schedule piece as well.
Doesn't ring a
We
bell.
have a 6-week projections process where each of the different packing houses say what they think their production is going to be for each of the next 6 weeks, and each week they roll 1 week off and add a new week, and they adjust them, and they use that as what they think the production is going to be, and then they have people looking at sales data to try and determine what kind of sales they're going to need, and then they try to match those up accordingly.
Brad,
6 week by variety and week.
yeah, how granular is that, Brad?
I did not go down to the pack level at all, though.
Yeah. I think it's by variety and grade.
Maybe we could tweak something like that. No, hold on. At what level does that become valuable or invaluable at this point?
See, I think that we have to have it go to probably to the package level.
Yeah.
Because we need to know if it's E2Ls or if it's bags. Right? I don't know that you have to go down all the way to the SKU, but
Right.
at least so that it's low enough level that it's meaningful. Because you got to be able to have something you're going to pass to the production planner, so they know what it is. They got to go figure out how to build.
I think that can be done. Like if you're looking at your total overall inventory, there's probably 50% of it that can be kind of firmly planned. And then the other 50 and the additional movement outside of, say, several key customers is going to have a ton of change. And it's going to be very dynamic. And it's going to be, maybe Gebbers runs out of Granny's 1 week and we're out at Chelan Fruit. And, those are just real life things that happen. We're out 1 week at one warehouse and in another week. And you try to balance it out. The balancing would be going back to trying to plan. But say you might have, all of a sudden we've got I'm not going to go off. There's a lot of things that all these variables play in every day. So I guess what I'm really saying is there probably is a good portion of the inventory that we could plan and really be, Gebbers is going to pack 2,000 R2L reds this week, and Chelan Fruit's going to do 2,000 this week, and Gold Digger's going to do whatever percentage and get that in there too. You could make some plans like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, that's between Walmart, Kroger, and, a few other customers. That's a fairly big chunk
Sure.
of that.
40 to 50% of the business potentially, right?
Just tons of variables. I just see lots of things that would play in. All of your rules would have to be, you'd have to have lots of different ways to look at it. Rules and exceptions.
Well, and I think, again, that's why we're here. We're trying to determine what's the best process before we start going into the system and creating a bill of materials, which we can do.
I think the bill of materials, knowing what each package is made of and keeping track of that inventory, that's one thing.
Right.
And then the production planning and, 10,000 foot view production planning, 5,000 foot, and then the daily 100 foot view.
Right.
Those are all very different and changing probably too rapidly. The idea with, if you get really firm and structured and what the end product will be is maybe we don't flex on a daily basis to satisfy a customer that has to have something that day, or we don't get the sale kind of option, or maybe it's tomorrow. But we can't pack it today to have it on the floor tomorrow because the system or the plan says we don't have time. That's something that I kind of am a little bit concerned about.
Sure.
So we plug in stuff to satisfy customer need and move fruit we need to move. That happens based on a priority. And so I'm just kind of tossing stuff on the table that we all need to think about. So
I mean, at any level, there's always going to be the flexibilities in the system. It might not be something that everybody can do, but we certainly have the ability to pack what we need when we need it. I mean, even if it's to the point where you just go and the production planner just goes in and says, all this 6 weeks just fell out of bed because, and we create a production plan right then and there. It's not something that we're not going to be able to pack the fruit.
So kind of what and again, I'm supposing a little bit. I kind of envisioned it's kind of the way we did with Roger Truck Scheduling, Kenny, or is that maybe to start with, we say, well, half of the work is this basic and stable stuff. So we schedule half of their time, and the other half of the time is mumble jumble still, and this other stuff's flowing through it. But now the good thing is you get the kinks worked out of the basic and stable stuff. It flows. I don't have to spend as much time on it.
and that's what I was saying.
Now I
There's a
got
certain
half the pie to worry about.
There's a certain amount of really low-hanging fruit, and that can be probably taken care of. The actual bill of materials for each package type, that can be developed and made pretty solid across the enterprise. And then maybe about 50% of our inventory could get pretty solid, and a plan by week probably developed. And then maybe that plan includes we're going to have this line and this line are going to produce the items that we need on this regular steady business, and these other two lines are going to produce all the variables. And you have lines that are really flexible and some that are not. You plug in the lines that are not flexible to what they can do most efficiently, and then your other lines that are variable you can use to do all the other stuff. That could get pretty systematic, I think.
Where does I'm looking at those two guys. Where does Wade's? He's got a marketing plan that's set up by month, by line, by variety, by. Where'd that come from? It came out of sales somewhere, right?
It starts with me and
That's
what we.
top box,
It's
right?
the top box. Where you're looking at a long term. We basically kind of lay out a year plan and have each warehouse's plan for the month. It's in a month category by variety, and then we know how many total boxes we're planning to pack that month, and then that is laid out. We adjust that every 2 weeks.
And that's already exists, right?
Yep.
And that's all going on up in there.
That's that top box.
It's
Kind
just
of.
not in the ERP. It's just a spreadsheet.
But in this case, that top box would never be an ERP kit.
Okay.
That's what feeds. I mean, it's that input. Those inputs are what inform the ERP or the decisions that get made in ERP.
What is ERP?
Enterprise Resource Plan.
The end-to-end cookie system.
Yeah, I'm good with
It's a
Right,
computer.
acronyms are fine. So somewhere then after you take that, then you're going to take it down to the next step and try to break out the low-hanging fruit.
Right, and then that's what we were talking about. At what level does it become useful to get it into the Kirky system, the end-to-end system. And 6 weeks out, it's unrealistic to say we're going to get down to the SKU level. And then maybe we can for 50% or 40% or whatever, but you're never going to get to that, not that far out. And if we have visibility we want visibility at 6 weeks in the ERP system. We need visibility. We don't have it now, but we need it. So how are we going to get there?
You know, for example, you're calculating your material order lead times.
Right.
Some things
Right.
you may need 6 weeks to order it to get
Right.
it here on time.
You know, like clams and poly bags and mesh bags are all
I'm
long.
getting ready to order cherry bags right now. That's longer than 6 weeks.
But-
Way
but
out
that's
in
the-
front of that.
Point of this plan
Right.
is the
As we talk about the bill of materials and production planning and purchasing and etc., the system has the sophistication to look at what your materials are, what they are in the warehouse, what they need to be in order to produce something that's going to be packed 6 weeks or 6 months from now, and cut purchase orders to the vendor. So we need to get all of these mechanisms thought through so that we can institute them into the ERP system.
where it makes sense.
Right.
One variable that kind of pops up to me, I mean, it's a daily variable, is that say we do a really good job of planning Walmart core items that we need every week. There's still a variable about, and this will have to maybe be a management sales SOP, is where's the salesman put the order? Because it comes down to that level daily. Where does the Walmart people put that order for Red Delicious? Do they know exactly what their percentages are?
You mean which packing house they put it at?
Right.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And that's and that I mean opens the can of worms that we've been skirting around, which is, do we have an SOP that defines to the salesman where they place the order when, based on a set of rules, or is there someone in Roger's group that's a logistics person that goes in and adjusts them all the time? And that's I mean, there's a number of ways to skin that cat. We just have to decide what way it is and whose responsibility. Again, kind of back to the roles and responsibilities, and define, okay, this is the way we're going to skin the cat. Here's the guy that has the responsibility, and here's what you got to do every day. So now you have someone you can hold accountable, and you have a reliable process that should be getting repeated every day.
And there are modules within the system that can help in that regard. They're not currently at the customer level, they're at the packing house level. So as you know, CFC produces 38% of the volume of the product, so they should get 38% of the business. There are facilities, I mean, that's another project. It's
Right.
on the to-do list, but there are programs, and same thing. Responsibilities at the management level. Who's going to make those determinations, and then you plug that data into the ERP system, and when they're placing the order, the system tells them where to put the order, or where you can't put the order, because Gebers has already gotten 10% more than their allocated, allotment, if you will.
So there are options. The first thing we have to do is decide how we want to skin the cat.
So, Sam boiled down, 8 charts that we saw in his office yesterday, which was literally his wallpaper, into a more concise focus in on a lot of the production planning and the bill of materials. That is a project that we're working on. There are another 6 or 8 projects that we need to work on to get this whole master process at the sales level, the allocation level, the production planning level, all instituted into the end-to-end system. But we're taking off bites at a time, and again, the bill of materials, production planning, purchasing, that's a big bite, and it's not something that we can do in a vacuum. It's not something that we can do with just thinking about the mechanics. And this is where Sam says, hey, we need to take a look at the big picture, and it is a big picture, and it's scary as hell, and that's why, frankly, 4 years later, we're still looking at doing some of these pieces and parts, but we need to do them. So we need to get buy-in at the enterprise level that this thought process needs to take place. I know that Sam's talking with CFM management and trying to get buy-in from the group up there, and a lot of the mechanics and a lot of the the actual process. I've been spending time in the system to make sure that it can do what we want it to do. Now, we really haven't identified anything in the system that's a roadblock, and we're talking about it today as we're thinking about it. Do we want a master 6-week, 8-week, 10-week plan, and at what level? So those are some things that we may determine we need to have in order for this thing to function at its best level. To Ken's point, we can get 50% of the inventory 6 weeks out or 8 weeks out or whatever the case may be, and that's a giant step forward. And then at every level, there's always going to be scenarios where, the production plan is going to change today. In fact, that is the rule. That's not the exception. And that's just the reality of the scenario. So, how do we work through that, and what do we do in the ERP now? Should we do anything in the ERP
So, as I've thought about this over the last week or two, I think that Kenny's exactly right. I think the things that we make to stock, like the Walmarts and Klobers and all of these, where we're just creating stock of stuff, there's a lot of common ground where we could develop some rules pretty quickly that would take a lot of work off of a lot of people's plate. The make-to-order world is a lot more challenging, where we're hitting specific orders as we go through time. And it's going to take a lot more thought and a lot more work to get there. But that might be a logical place to break things apart and kind of step into this in a piecemeal way.
Do you do that already? I mean, I know you guys have those run schedules out every day. Are they partially filled out kind of a week in advance, or us mentally anyway?
Right now, well, maybe mentally it's farther out, but it's literally 40. Well, I'd say it's 48 hours. We're working a couple days out ahead, trying to solve things, and Jared and Bryce are plugging in items that they can see are coming up. For instance, the standard things like Walmart R2L, Reds or Galas or whatever, those might go on a certain line. He might be out 2 days with that, and knowing that that line is filling up, and you kind of work that way to keep those plans out ahead of you. Then when we have big ads, for instance, this Gala ad that we're doing, just starting right now, not Gala, Fuji, that's planned. We'd hope to have that planned 6 weeks ago, and it kind of came together 3 or 4 weeks ago. It's going today, so we've planned from the big picture. Do we have enough bins of Fuji's pre-sized to do this? Have we got enough to handle this ad? To all the product ordering that you did and Gebers did to get the mesh NFL bags in. All of that came together. That was a longer term deal, bigger volume. So we planned that over a longer term. But day to day, it's like 48 hours max.
So we're kind of skipping from conceptual to the nitty-gritty pretty quickly.
Which is what Sam said right up front.
And like I said, the bill of materials stuff on a good portion of what we pack every week, that can be figured out, and that can become a pretty valuable tool really fast for ordering. And
right.
And again, the inventory and planning for production planning and knowing what you're going to have to pack over the course of a month or 6 weeks, that can be pretty well ironed out for about half of what we're doing. So.
The hard part I see is the role is really different. As the structure comes into place, it will help focus responsibilities for for that material manager, material coordinator. But so much of their work is going to be in the system, getting stuff set up and making sure the item master is right, and making sure that the bill of material, all the elements are organized and right, and talking to the different warehouses to make sure that they've got them ordered and that it's there, and that so it's really a different skill set than what we've traditionally had. Because kind of traditionally we've had in the scheduling role, it's more of that brute force, get it done on the line today, and you got to have kind of a bulldog to do it. It's not someone who's in looking at data on a system, so it's a really different skill set. So that's makes it challenging. Is some of these roles have different attributes, and so it's going to be interesting to get people trained and to get people that want to do that kind of work, because it's really a different kind of work. In a lot
I
of
mean,
cases.
at some level, a lot of that's, like, again, a lot of that's being done. I mean, the individual packing house, Joe Lemons of the world or whatever. I mean, he's taking inventory every morning. He's cutting an email for a purchase order. So instead of the email, it needs to be a purchase order. It needs to have an impact on financials right away. I mean, I have no idea how bills get paid now and where the purchase orders come from. And what's that whole check-in process, or is there one? Or the bill shows up and we pay it because Northwest says we should pay it. You know, it scares the bejeebers out of me.
It scares the bejeebers out of me too. The hard thing is that the way that the buying is done now, in order to, I think, and I'm not in no way an expert on how this is happening, but I believe what happens is a lot of pre-ordering gets done for the whole season, and Northwest Wholesale mostly holds it for us. So we're already, in their mind, committed to that, but it's still sitting on their lot.
Right.
And we may have paid for it, and it's still sitting on their lot. So that's how I don't know how that's going to.
Well, that would Northwest would frankly just be another inventory location for the product. So that's no different than being at the Neff plant or out here in the Sea Line or whatever the case may be. So that doesn't concern me so much.
And you'd be able to transfer from locations?
Yes. The inventory has to be at the production facility in order for the production plan to work properly. It has to be there.
How is the bill of materials currently set up as far as being able to interact with the RTI?
Well, that's something.
How is it
Well,
thought it would work?
The bill of materials will take place at CFM. The materials, and Kathy, this is what we talked about yesterday, the actual materials master would live or be the responsibility of the individual packing houses so that they can have their own account numbers. Not at we can't have the material,
Correct.
can't have the account numbers at the CFM level because they're different. So even though the materials may be the shotgun and the person responsible for materials will be at CFM, there's going to be a duplication at the packing house level, the organization level, as to what account numbers there are. So therefore, that materials has to live in Gebbers, Gold Digger, CFC.
So in theory, when they set up a new item,
Yes.
it would RTI down that item. We would then have to go plug in on our side.
Well, Kathy, this is where you were talking that this is going to emulate the APC process, which is essentially they've got to recreate the material in the individual data set.
Correct, right. No, I mean, we don't have an RTI, but we have other master files that we have RTI'd, that we were just trying to take the approach of, what can you do in the system now today without any changes?
And the APCs is still being done manually?
Correct.
APCs, though, on one hand, is a
Finite set.
It's very,
Yeah.
You don't do change
Right,
very often.
right.
I maybe got
No,
one
no,
off
no.
the
You're
right.
again. That's what we're here to discuss.
Yeah.
The whole RTI scenario is obviously part of the discussion topic, and it's like everything else. We've got thousands of materials that have to be input into the system, uploaded, whatever the case may be. But how often? And I have no clue. How often do we institute new packaging materials? Every day, every week, every month? Is it 10 items a month or 1,000 items a month? I don't know. And then what's the offset? If it's 10 items a month, then it's a $48,000 enhancement from end to end. Where's that? How's that play into it? And we need to discuss it.
Yeah.
But right now we were thinking that it would be a CFM responsibility. Materials is set up, and then the individual packing houses would create their own materials in their database.
So the CFM would create, let's say, the header, but not the actual materials themselves?
No, they'd create both. They'd create
To what benefit does Chelan Fresh get from creating the materials?
I don't think that they get any benefit per se. It's just a person is responsible for it.
Right.
Versus all the three organizations creating their own.
Because as we discussed earlier, there can be occurrences where materials might be slightly different. We had stickers versus.
Sure. Absolutely. And the bill of materials can and will be different. So that we'll have a master bill of materials, if you will,
Right.
and then we'll have variations in the
So
system.
you'll
that
have
allow for
you'll
that.
have a SKU
Mhm.
that may have 3 different variations.
Correct.
And that'll work.
Yes. Yes.
And then, I mean, the big benefit to having it at CFM is then we should be able to roll up that cost information to be able to provide visibility to the sales guys. This is the package cost for this configuration. You know, as you dream up.
But you're not putting that cost. Would you be putting that cost information at the CFM level?
No.
I mean, because it's really going to reside down at our individual levels.
Right, but we
Because
could
we
have
each have our own
Cognos
separate
reporting
costs.
or whatever to.
But
I mean,
you'd
there has
be
to be an
able to
average
roll it
cost for this product. For this finished goods, the average cost across the enterprise is X. We know for a fact it's going to be different per organization, but
And
from
you'd
a
rather
sales
have
perspective,
the CFM to tie together that these 3 bills are really this one item or one SKU.
but that's always going to be the case. And the system.
Dan?
Yeah.
I guess one note that I just wanted to interject is that, and this, you know, again, we're kind of like all discussing this right now, but I guess we were not aware that CFM was generating purchase orders for materials that would be delivered to the warehouses. So I think if you look at
Got a whole lot of
look at
head
our
shake.
diagram-
We got a whole lot of head shaking. No.
No.
So.
Now,
Oh, okay.
Well, I think that they're if I understood the process, they're negotiating a mass buy for boxes or whatever.
Oh, okay.
I
And-
think that's a waste of time, frankly, that any warehouse except maybe Gold Digger is buying in such huge volumes
Right.
that there isn't any real volume discount for combining Gebers and Schlen fruit together.
Right.
I mean, short of maybe an oddball poly bag.
Right.
I mean, the cartons and the trays and all that is
Right.
all.
Kathy, you and I had talked earlier on that the actual purchase order has to be at the packing house level.
Right.
You can't cut a purchase order for 0000000 and have it delivered to Neff or Gebers South or whatever.
No.
The other problem is
Right.
the other problem is CFM is using the purchase order module for purchasing outside fruit. So
That's fine. No, that's fine.
no, but I mean,
That's not a
if
problem.
suddenly you had to do both, it could confuse things.
I don't think there's any way we want to do that. See if we do that. And I'm really pretty
Oh.
nervous about, you know, if the master bill of materials is going to start at CFM, it's going to have a lot of input coaching from the warehouses. Because
Absolutely.
We don't know.
Michael said that this morning. He says
We
when
don't
it
know.
becomes time for this process to take place. I mean, the blinders on. Mike says, "I'd love to be there." I says, "They're going to love to have you there. They need you there." So there have to be representatives from each of the packing facilities.
I can't tell you how many times when we're looking at a potential new SKU, customers asking. It may be as simple as Costco changing from a 12 to a 10 count clam, which introduces another size of fruit. That just changing that particular item has got ramifications to the warehouses, and I may not know some of the things that, or anybody in our office may not know what it really takes to get it done at the warehouse level.
Right back to Sam's SOPs. If a new product is instituted or whatever, you got to make 3 phone calls minimum,
Yeah,
whatever.
There's a change board,
Right.
whatever it is,
Right.
to bring the interested parties together.
Right.
It's not as simple as, okay, I'll make a phone call and I'll change a code in the system.
Right.
It's
So is
it's a
there
little more
SKU?
complicated than that.
Is that what, let's say, a regular weight box of Red Delicious in a tray pack, is that a SKU?
So tray pack would be a SKU, E3P or E3M would be a SKU.
Okay,
Oh,
let's
there's
go
two
with
different.
that.
There's material SKUs and there's finished good SKUs.
Okay, well, let's say the finished goods SKU for a
Right.
box of Red Delicious tray pack in a trout blue lid.
Okay.
Size
Size. Gotta have
Right.
size.
Right.
And what?
Size,
Okay,
grade.
yeah, good point.
Grade.
Size 100.
label,
Yeah.
Okay, so
lid.
now, do we have from that item, we create a bill of materials, and Gebers' box has handholds and ours doesn't, and we use a paper tray pad and they use a bulletin pad, is that their equipment is set up to feed
Right.
on, and ours feeds the other way, and it doesn't work real well
Right.
now.
Right.
So we would have a SKU for an item, and we all three companies have different bills of materials, slightly, not much.
Right.
Is the system capable of dealing with all that, or are you going to have to call and say, rearrange all that? Now,
Let's-
we jump to not 113s and we start the process.
Let's
over
get
again.
clarification. Yes,
Everybody
yes, the system can handle that. But Kathy, at the bill of material level, can you have? I know that you can substitute any given packaging material for the bill of material at the time that you're creating the production plan. But can you have segregated or separate tweaks to the bill of material by location?
In the master file, yeah. So you could have the same item, but location 1001, they would have their bill of materials defined the way they are going to pack the item, and then 2021 could have theirs defined.
Right. Hold on
For
a
the
second.
same item code, but yet
Paul
different locations.
Paul has a comment.
Well, but all of our pricing is the same across all of our locations. We have 7.
Ours
Six,
are,
seven
but
different ones,
Evers
so-
uses some things different than ours.
But
Same
we
pack.
can't have bill of material tracking by location.
You want it
Pretty
by
much is by
10, by 10, by yeah,
exchange.
Right.
Exchange.
right.
No.
Whether we packed it
Right.
at Terrace or we packed it at Rondo, it's
Right.
the same cost. It's the same materials we use.
Right.
So
But even
if we
within,
do it by location, we're gonna have to set up bill of materials for every location.
Right.
Which would be,
and I think Kathy, we had to.
Have a copy button?
Yeah, we definitely get copy features. Still a
Yeah.
pain in the ass though.
Oh,
Kathy, the hierarchy is not there for this scenario, correct? You can't have a bill.
Correct, not currently.
Okay, and that might be a tweak, an enhancement.
But couldn't you,
Yeah, but I can
Within
see where you could have a
CFM,
difference just because you're maybe one
depending on
packing
which
line
line you're on, couldn't you have a package
Yeah.
that has a different bill of material because it's a different line? That's the same package. So an E3M off of Orondo may be made differently than an
Hand pack
E3M
versus Giro
C-line.
produced mesh bag
Yeah, that's
is
a good
different.
because your line's configured physically different.
Then you can do it by line, which is even lower level than
Right.
and
location.
I think
Yeah,
a
but I-
location would be beneficial because in Ken's world, he's wanting to know inventory by location. How many 88 trays do I have sitting down there?
That's
So it's
definitely
got
the
to
way
be by
that.
I mean, it doesn't have to be.
No, but the
it would be
material
beneficial
materials will be relieved, inventoried, and
by
etc.
location.
by location. But I understand Paul's issue, question, concern
Yeah.
is that a bill of material at every location is a pain
Mhm.
and not necessary.
But by line
Because
would
you're gonna want to
even be,
manage inventory by. I mean, I know you check your inventories by location, but that means you got to go into the system until you moved. I mean,
Right.
there's going to be an inventory
Sure.
tracking, which I
Yes.
talked about
Sure.
last time we
Sure.
met, and I don't think that was in scope with this. But without that, that's going to be pretty tough to do.
Right,
Every
we-
time you're moving shook around,
Well, we talked. That was one of the first topics: is
Truckload.
transfer from one location to another. We have to address that.
do we want it by line? Because we've got 3 lines in one plant, 2 in another.
Well,
one,
what's the
one, and one.
benefit cost? What are you going to benefit by line versus location?
I don't know. Well, I'd come back to Ken's point though, if you've got
You could have a difference in your
one line can do Giro machine mesh
Mhm.
bagging,
Mhm.
that's pretty unique, really. Most of them are going to do most of the packages, I guess.
But the Euro or a Giro, excuse me, is a separate SKU of them. Is that correct?
Well, we pack it 2 different. That mesh bag can be
Mesh bag.
packed at least 2 different ways. And now I think about Geber's machine that does the full banding style packing. That's another cost, literally.
Call it a mesh bag though.
We-
Today,
the-
whether
So it's one
The
SKU.
SKU is
whether
one
it's
SKU.
Giro or if
That's
it's
actually a
something-
third.
And it's not
So-
necessarily by location. It could be one location, 2 separate lines. Awesome. How else could we boil it down? Yeah, shift. Night shift does it with glow in the dark sticks.
Definitely cost
No, that's true.
I guess that's what I just kind of wanted to. The bill of materials is an exciting deal in terms of having a handle on it. It's take back to Stamilt's little catalog of here's what you put in a box, and each package, this is what it looks like. Well, we aren't quite there, but a bill of materials would sort of suffice for that, kind of, except we would need an alternative for, we do it a slight bit different than somebody else does it.
And yes, we can handle that.
And we would have, all those SKUs would have tiny little variations in them, maybe, I don't know if that affects anything.
The exceptions.
You know.
So do you have one standard process and then allow exceptions?
Mhm.
Or do you have more specific processes that are, I mean, I think that's the question. And there's trade-offs to,
Can we create a monster that's so big and unmanageable?
That's what we don't want to do.
I know,
Yeah.
before we get, as we come down that line of SKUs, you could end up with a lot of optional packages.
Yes.
One of my concerns is, especially on like this, where you have two packing lines, same location,
Right.
but they have a different type of mesh that they use. What is that going to look like to that packing line supervisor for what mesh they're going to, what SKU and the specific of it? So you don't throw off your whole inventory because they're picking the wrong thing, you know? So imagine even the coding on that could be so close, but just one
Right.
letter off that they
In
can
that-
mess up on every different.
In the case of, say, the drill, when we do the full wrap stuff, I think that's Safeway stuff. So the label defines the mesh and the way that would happen. I mean, it is separated that way. That may not be where you want the separation, but that's possible.
They use different color mesh for each different variety too.
Are you concerned that there's going to be too much opportunity for somebody to pick the wrong product, the material product?
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that.
If you had some,
Oh,
if you had,
I
you
get
know,
it, but-
an expert at your warehouse that's in materials,
Yeah.
but they're not going to be out on the line when that person's making that
Right.
that SKU
Well,
choice or that a change. They can plan it.
Right.
But it might be a forklift driver that goes out.
well, phase two for sure, and the system does not handle this now, is we'd like to ultimately get to a pick list, a materials pick list. So when the production plan is put in place, we're telling them what to put on the line to produce it. By item, by warehouse room roll and slot. It doesn't exist today in the N10 system. But yeah, I see that as a real world
that's
issue. But at what,
could that be?
here we go again. We got to get the process started,
Yeah.
and then the inventory would be
Maybe you just maintain
at the end of the day. They used this product. It was
Like
no, it wouldn't be because the system doesn't know that they used the wrong product. Okay, that would be caught in the physical inventory, and adjustments would have to be made. Somebody either smart enough to realize that they
But it would be
used it
pretty
last
good
week and
interface.
screwed up or
A lot
whatever.
easier
No,
than
okay,
going
I understand.
Have you thought about, on that Northwest Wholesale scenario, are you going to have them, have you thought about having them on your system as well, receiving POs? Or how do you receive a PO when you don't have your own employee there doing the receiving?
Well, again, all part of that's what we had to discuss. Do we want or need a terminal out there? Is that going to be the responsibility of the individual shippers now? Or are we going to entrust them to receive it on our behalf? And the whole, frankly, and I've said it out loud, I'll say it out loud again, that whole vendor managed inventory thing, I don't get it. I get it, but I don't get it. You're that's your hard-earned dollars out there, and it's they order stuff because they think they need to order stuff. There's no guys in there. Okay, good. But it just blows me away. So you're giving them way too much flexibility. Well, he used to work for one of those guys. Huh?
Used to order all this stuff.
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
time.
So I mean, it doesn't mean that anybody's taking advantage of the situation, but the opportunity is just freaking. And I don't understand how the banks let you get away with all that kind of stuff. It just blows me away. All right, I gotta get down. Anywho,
They're used to
Don't
it
ask,
over
don't
100
tell.
years of doing it.
Don't ask, don't tell.
What was that?
Don't ask, don't tell. So yes, Brooke, at some level, that decision has to be made as well. What is that scenario going to look like, and whose responsibility is it?
I mean, in a perfect world, I'd like to get rid of that too. And you
Right.
don't, you don't put it on your books until you actually
Right.
received it here at the
Right.
warehouse.
Right.
And you had a much lower inventory.
Right. Oh yeah,
just in time.
All that.
And requisitions and POs and receipts, signed receipt slips, and all the things that should be in the system confirming that it arrived.
Yeah.
So this little page here or whatever, these are the functions and life cycle of materials production planning or whatever. And receiving purchase orders, number 8 on the list. I don't, obviously this document is not a be all tell all. It's just the discussion points. We have to receive purchase orders all the time, every day, every week, whatever. Who's going to do it? Where's it going to happen? There are going to be terminals at every every receiving location. Is there going to be one at Northwest? We need to make those determinations as a company. I can tell you what I think should happen, but that's not the real world. So we have to make those decisions as a group. We can turn on the mechanics tomorrow. We might run into a pothole because we need to. If we turn on the mechanics the way it is right now, then you might have to have a bill of material at every packing facility, which is not what we want to do. So as a group, we said, no, you know what? That's too much work. We need it at the exchange level, end to end. Make a tweak for us. Let's institute that as a policy. Back up even further from Sam's perspective. What do the responsibilities look like? Who's going to do the work? Does it mean a new body has to be hired, etc.? Let's make that determination. And Sam's trying to sell this to the CFM management team and get this thing off the ground. But we have to make those decisions before the mechanics can get instituted.
Ken, how often is a new item created? Is it 10 a week? Is it 10 a month? Is it 1,000 a month? What is your experience over the last number of years?
Well, lately, maybe one a week. And a lot of times it's just a minor adjustment to a SKU. Like
Let's say I set up SKUs multiple times.
a lot of
I
what
get calls from lines and they call and say, hey, we're been asked to pack this. It's not, or the barcode, the G10 barcode is not set up. Get it multiple times.
I think a lot of that may have something to do with we're trying to create a
US Extra NFLs.
and it's in
None of them are set up.
It's in a box that the label is usually the deal.
Yeah. So every time we come up with a new combination of variety rate for NFL,
So that
it all comes in.
Right, it becomes an item master setup issue because it's not set up everywhere uniformly.
And by definition, the bill of materials couldn't be set up, and the materials couldn't be set up.
Yeah.
And so
So you're running the same issue.
When you got those NFL requests, was it just for the G10 number?
No, if the item's set up, the G10's there. Because the G10 gets set up automatically when you set up an item master. They're just not there.
Because I thought I had that set. So
We had all that extra fancies in there, but the US Extra as well.
well,
Anyway,
and that kind of gets down to the granularity of the way we operate now with end-to-end. It has to have an item totally set up with every detail in it.
can't place the order without an item. Can't create a pack out without a pallet tag without an item. Can't create a production plan unless that
We used
bill of
to.
materials is there. Well, again, I think I made that comment earlier, is that with putting things into the end-to-end system, there's going to be structure, there's going to be rigidity.
And when
That's
you,
a good thing 95% of the time.
And when you add bill of material on top, it's just another layer that has to be set up every time
Right.
before you'll be able to execute.
at what point does it stop? Something if you don't have a bill of material. I know what happens on the item master, but what about
Pallet tag creation.
pallet tag?
The pack out, you can't generate the pack out.
So it'd be
Same
similar.
scenario. Yeah.
And in the
Oh my God, I
scenario-
can't do this. You get a call.
in the future where you would catch it would be at the detailed planning level. So when they go to create the detailed plan, there wouldn't be a bill of material to tell them how to plan it. So they look at the item master and then it wouldn't tell them what the package recipe was for that item.
sure you get the phone call earlier.
Well, if it's that early. Brian can take the time.
It's usually 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
So they got here
You
for
always
over.
have to run
Actually,
night
Roy,
shift.
just so you're aware,
On the
the
weekend.
terrace
On the
is
weekend,
now
yeah.
run 7 days a week.
Okay.
But not double shift.
Okay. That's good.
But now they're talking about
They're running
going
2
to
different
night
crews,
shift.
3 and a half.
Catch
At the
that?
terrace?
Yeah.
A 3rd shift then?
No, just
Or are they just talking,
2 longer,
Yes.
5 days, 6 days a week.
oh,
No,
5 to
days
6?
and nights.
Oh, okay. So I'd
Because
read
we're not getting
3.5
enough hours.
hours.
Because life could be too easy.
I mean, if they change it to the other, that's fine with me, because there's other lines that are running nights anyway, so. Apparently, 5 and 6.
I'm curious. So we go back up. I get the sales and operations plan. We would do from the master scheduling to the detail, somewhere in there where you said that's what we're doing now, I think. So if we created some additional staff or something at CFM to do the master scheduling and I'm trying to get to your detail would catch the master bill of materials.
Right, exactly. They take the master schedule that would say, here's what I need to make this week. And then they would bring in the bill of material and the item master, which is the SKU information. And they would then lay out the specific instructions about line A is going to do this at 2 o'clock tomorrow. And they're going to run these bins. And it would tie all of the operations piece from.
And that's still at CFM before it gets
No,
over.
that would be at the shipper level, but that would happen.
Would there be a way? I'm trying to get to where Paul gets the call, or somebody gets the call 2 weeks in advance, or a week in advance, and they're working the bill of materials. Oops, we forgot to get. We got to add.
Well, hopefully the
Yeah.
materials manager, that other role. So kind of the way it's designed is the master scheduling and the detail planners are focused on what and when. The material guys are focused on the package information and the setup in the system. And so
they're where in that sequence?
the orange writing, kind of the orange box here on the side. So your material requirements planning is where it's a separate activity where you're focused on, now what does the packaging need to be and what's the timing it needs to be. So they're looking at the master schedule too, saying, okay, the master schedule says in 4 weeks we're going to do, a Fuji special or a Fuji special with Kroger.
Right.
So you'd be looking at that, and then you'd be looking at your material and getting your ordering and your packaging and everything set up. So there's a triangle of communication that's going to be going on all the time between the material guys, the master schedule guys, and the detail planners. And so now you have 3 people focusing on the activities from 3 different perspectives.
And does that create?
Sam?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. The gentleman was still asking his question. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Go for it, Kevin.
My question related to what you said, Sam, about the master plan. You said something about looking at the bill of materials. Are you thinking that the master plan would tell you what materials you needed over the next 3 to 6 weeks?
No, the master plan simply tells what I need to make and when I think I'm going to make it, not how.
Okay.
Yeah, realizing,
Okay.
Kathy, that unless we get down to the SKU level, you'll never have that visibility.
But
Right.
Yep.
the MRP, or the material requirements planning, done by the material team, are the ones who get into the, okay, now what packages and what details and how much do I need where for what lines, how are we going to execute the packaging steps.
And Ken, as all this is put together, in theory, Paul should never get a call again. Because it was way downstream or upstream that all this stuff got created. Because everybody, in their job responsibilities, SOPs and or systematized, they have to be there. So he should never get a call again, in theory.
Because today,
From pallet ticketer.
the way it is today, we don't really know that until we go to create a pallet ticket.
Right.
Because we turned all the front end off, and all of those checks are turned off. So as you start turning the front end on and making these requirements earlier, you push that requirement or that check earlier in the process. So you should find it before you start packing the box.
Right.
I
You still-
get the calls from earlier now.
Yeah, you still might get the call, but it's
production line's getting it now because they need the G team.
right. And that,
Now
at
I
that
don't
point,
get
they're
calls from pallet ticketers anymore because they're already taken care of before.
but it's
But
it's
it's
a lot
the
less
same.
critical at that point.
Right.
You know, it's not. I'm packing the product right now. It's
Yeah, we
okay. I got.
pallets.
All right, I get it. I'm sleeping. I'll get to it tomorrow morning. That kind of that kind of a scenario.
Before that point.
Yeah.
They're sitting there going,
Exactly. Exactly.
About 50 pallets made.
Yep. And again, these are some of this is just the mechanical steps, and at some level, each and every one of these steps is being done today. There's nothing that we're introducing for the most part that's not being done at some level today. I almost feel like going into the details is maybe, the actual materials details and stuff. We've done a little bit of that in the past. I think we have to make some fundamental decisions before we start turning on creating materials master files. We talked about its impact on the financials. Is this something that we want to have as step one in the process? Because we can institute the bill of materials without impacting the financials. But if we're taking off or we're biting into this thing, why not bite? And I'll say just that little bit extra. Let's do it now. Let's not wait until we have all of this done.
So one of the questions I have, and it's kind of, I think it's to you and to Todd maybe. When I think about the bill of material process and what we're doing, because Gebers Farms has Kirky as kind of their core operating system in the warehouse, when you turn bill of materials on and receiving, suddenly they're going to get all of these. I mean, you're going to start to automate the relieving inventory as you turn bins into boxes, and you're going to start to get some benefits that way. What are the implications with bill of materials where Chelan Fruit really isn't doing that today? You've got you're doing it all in Computech in your legacy processes. Is that going to create extra steps that Todd's going to have to do to balance? I mean, is he going to have to do some kind of transaction to balance the bill of materials since Kirky isn't on over here doing something as the inventory's relieved, or it's? You understand my question? I mean,
well, I would expect it to. You're creating packed inventory, which relieves the, I'll call it shook inventory. And if we follow set procedures for purchase orders and receiving of shook inventory, it should maintain perpetual inventory, which will spot check, which we do already. So we would substitute one process for the new process with the anticipation it would be improved.
and
So I guess in answer to your question, not really. Yes, will be additional procedures or steps, but I think that's true for Gebers Farms, Chelan Fruit, anybody that goes to a bill of materials process, which, it's a better process, but yet it's going to take a little bit more work.
Todd,
Mm-hmm.
one thing to also think about, I guess, and it kind of relates to Stan's phase 1.5 that he has up on the screen,
Mm-hmm.
is that don't recall how you guys are using. Are you guys using the AP or are you using the Computech AP?
We're using Computech AP. When we went through the installation, we had anticipated using bill of materials and the AP, and with the anticipation of creating the purchase order system for materials. But throughout the installation, we scrapped the bill of materials, so we are not using the end-to-end AP system. but we could
Okay.
do
Well, just
so.
one thing. Okay. Well, one of the things I was just going to point out is that with the if you started utilizing the purchase orders and then doing the purchase order receipts,
Mm-hmm.
that would create another journal that you would be able to utilize, kind of like you're doing your sales journal now,
Mm-hmm.
so that you could book those entries into the CompuTech GL for your shook inventory coming in, and then what your payables would be.
Right.
Then as you got invoices from the vendors for that shook inventory, there is a way to do like a three-way match, and then in our system you match up the invoice to the purchase order receipt, and then it interfaces over into the AP side. And that may be a piece of the pie that, if you continue to use the CompuTech AP, you may not be able to use, end-to-end system for reconciling, payables and et cetera.
As long as it interfaces with QuickBooks.
It's maybe a tweak we need to do.
I don't think it does that either.
No, that all sounds good, Ken.
Okay.
So where would the group like to go from here? I mean, we put a lot on the table today. I don't think we've gotten anybody that's, nobody's left, said the hell with this, but, that's always a good thing.
What's the number? What's 5.2? Creates production summary journal.
Kathy, 5.2, we talked about a couple weeks back as well. So when we're creating the production plan, we have the availability to feed the ledger at that point as well.
Yeah, the production planning, when you finalize the actual production, Brooke, it updates the production plan with actuals. And then when you finalize the production plan itself, it sets up entries, kind of like Todd was saying, to relieve the shook inventory and book finished goods inventory. Is that correct, Pat?
Yes.
Okay.
And it can book variances from your standard. So if she has budget, say material costs, if you think that your fiber or your boxes are going to cost, say, $2 a box, and in reality your weighted average is $2.10 based on how the inventory is being maintained systematically, it can book a cost variance or a volume variance based on what your BOM is as well.
I think, just to clarify, the theory is, and the way some of the other clients have used this production summary journal, is that it does, relieve the materials inventory account, but then book the finished goods inventory. And then on the sales journal, once the product is sold, that is the process that relieves the finished goods inventory account.
That's correct.
So for Brooke, for you, we might need to look at that, because I think a lot of yours, your other entry or your entry under sales journal is up right now to the grower payable. So I don't know if you wanted to, if you want to book the finished goods inventory or how you would want to handle that. We'd have to talk about some of that.
Okay.
Well, Kathy, yeah, and that would be a good discussion, because by using the grower type master file for setting up your account numbers, you can put in, if they need to continue to use grower payable, they can put the account number into that field, which could either be finished goods and the offset or grower payable, because it depends on what kind of we're using it most now, have various accounts that they need it to go to based on if it's an outside grower, if it's an internal grower, that type of thing, or if they do want it to be finished good inventory or not. So there's hierarchy involved in that, depending on what kind of grower it is.
That was a long answer, Brooke.
The smoke's coming out of her ears.
Yeah.
So the production plan, create production plan. So in order to get this bill of materials process to work, that's one of the requirements.
You have to have a production plan. a detailed production plan tied to the BOM.
Right.
Okay, so that's
At the-
within the system.
Yes.
We don't have any such.
That's my point of
Right.
drawing this picture is
Okay,
to turn it on. There's some assumptions about other roles
right.
and processes that have to be
So
considered.
how big
It's
of
not-
a bite is that?
It's not a lot of physical work. In fact, it's pretty dang small. The startup process and getting all the bill of materials made in the system and the materials codes in the system, that's a pretty big undertaking.
Right.
You know?
We already done it once.
Right. You did it for a
It's
while.
about
Yeah, you did a lot of
40
the work, right?
40 hours, I
Right.
think, or more is what. That was just for one location.
Kaylee and Michael have actually done a lot of work identifying, at least, put the Gebber's blinders on for
Yeah,
a moment,
yeah.
which has got to be 80x% of your inventory as well. We've contacted every vendor. We've got the SKUs, the material SKUs, and the nomenclature, how it fits into the end-to-end system and all that. So yeah, that's a lot of work that still has to be done. But once that's done,
Mhm.
the actual creation of the production plan, it's a very simple process.
Can you tell me,
I can,
very,
So it goes down to the SKU level.
yeah, the production plan, yeah.
and who does this
Well,
production plan?
Again, that's to be determined. But if you want to just throw it at the wall and see what sticks, Ken's doing it now. For all pretense and purposes.
Dan?
Yes.
I just want to clarify Todd's question, or just to understand what you guys' thought process is. I just want to make one clarification in that if you're talking about taking baby steps to utilize different pieces of the system, just note that you can use the purchase orders, the materials, bill of materials, and materials inventory without using production planning. So again, I want to kind of clarify what Todd's question was, is that you could, set up all your bill of materials, use purchasing, receive materials, and as the pack outs were finalized, that's going to relieve the materials inventory. You don't have to use production planning if you wanted to just look at materials inventory.
Making notes, Kathy.
Okay,
You couldn't use the suggested POs unless you were using production planning.
that's true.
Right, that makes sense.
And the production summary journal isn't created.
Correct.
The production summary journal.
The production summary journal just really kind of confuses me because isn't that kind of like before the you're creating a finished good before you've actually created it. I mean, it's a plan. It's not actually what happened.
That isn't created work until after the actual production is completed and you finalized it.
So is there?
So the journal's not until the actual pack outs that are associated with the plan
Yeah.
are finalized and the production plan is finalized. The summary, the records that are fed into the summary are not updated until those are finalized.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
have to have a
but there's
plan.
another process, another journal process if you don't use production planning to relieve inventory.
No, it doesn't. There's not a journal that's created. It just updates the materials inventory files, if you will, so that you could look at a materials inventory report or an inquiry screen to see what your balance was for your materials. It doesn't relieve a materials inventory account or create a journal. You would have to do that manually.
Do you have anybody doing that?
I know Duckwell was using materials inventory for a while, but I don't know that how they were handling the accounting because they don't use production planning. I'm not sure. Pat, do you remember?
I know they're not. They have to be preparing a journal because I know I've spoken to one of the young ladies there that does their physical inventory updating in the system because they do a materials physical inventory that then adjusts everything as well. And on that, they are using our journal, but I don't think they're using it in any other fashion. The way they're doing it has to be a GL entry based on the reports for the month.
I mean, if we're gonna go through,
Journal.
if we're gonna go through this whole, if we're gonna go through this whole process, I don't, for the amount of work required to create the production plan, even if it's 2 days ahead of time, why wouldn't you just do it? I mean, you're creating a production plan for X number of items for the day. I mean, the input is minutes. I mean, and to your point, Todd, I mean, it's,
Well, that's it. I don't
it's
know
a
anything
very-
about the production plan.
it's
so
a very simple entry process. It's
Okay.
basically 3 screens worth of information.
The question, though, that was kind of unraveled when we first approached this subject was that the details, it's very simple, but the details that were there were insufficient to describe all of the attributes of our SKU. So for that plan to be meaningful for the line to be able to set it up and do it,
Right.
you've got to have the whole recipe.
Right.
And that's something that would have to be looked at and understood.
Right.
And also know that, Ken, help me out here. I believe Chelan Fruit gets about 6 to 10 updates on the plan on a daily basis for the tray fill lines alone.
I'd say that's
Yeah,
probably
'cause
real.
it changes on a dime.
That's an issue that we're trying to lessen.
Right, I understand.
But,
in today's current state, so that's, so I'm just,
So how would that play in if you were to have a production change, almost mid-run?
The
The
production.
state is based on the district type variety. How big a change are they?
Say again, Pat.
What type of changes are you seeing that are coming through quickly?
Ken, what you answer?
Well, we could inject totally different variety, package type, everything could be plugged into the middle of the schedule, mid-run.
Right, they're loading the truck and the pallet gets kicked, and now we got to hurry up and make a pallet to replace the rejected fruit. So suddenly there's an emergent request that gets shoved in front of other work that was planned. I mean, that's a real example. It may not have been on a plan for anything today. It's totally new.
Well, at that level, you'd just be creating a production run on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, it's
So someone calls in and says you need to change your
or
plan.
you give
Got
that.
your production
Yeah,
person
oh,
just
yeah.
going in and plugging and changing that.
You can change the plan, create a new plan, give that capability to Butch or whoever. Again, how much leeway do you want to give Butch and gang, or is that something that's controlled at CFM, or something that only Troy can do? Or, again, all those things have to be worked out.
Create a pallet ticket if it's not in here.
No.
One more phone call.
Call it phone calls.
Something's gonna forget to put it in there.
These screens would be additional
Does
inputs.
that go right down the line even? I see production line on there.
How often does something change?
I mean,
Chelan Fresh has done it 4. Jill and Jennifer, Troy are only here till 4 or 5. How often does that person, Butch on the line, have to make that change himself when there's nobody else around instructing?
Well, at night, I don't think it happens very much at all, unless it's very rare that we might be trying to do something in an emergency at 6:30 because we have a Kroger truck that has to have X. I think that's a very rare
It's an
thing.
exception.
Yeah. And occasionally I could say that there's verbals that go on. Well, instead of putting those 88s in an R2L, put them in a bag and start at 7:30 when you do your nighttime break. Put them in that because we have to have 8-5 bags for tomorrow. That has been done in the past, and I can see that if we're going to go to something like that, that style just wouldn't be able to happen. And that kind of goes back to customer service. But on the other side of the coin, we have to have some balance of how we run our operation.
Absolutely.
That's, I mean, you
Straight.
don't want to have your people doing that in the middle of the night.
The other thing,
Getting
Ken,
the sticker and the clip right and all that crap in the middle of a run.
but if the bill of material and the detail was right, so that all of those instructions are in the system, instead of creating the spreadsheets that get sent around, you put it in the system, and then the production plan flows from within the system, and you eliminate all of those extra spreadsheets.
And that's, I think that's where it would have to go if
Right.
those schedules kind of match what everybody wants to operate off of. Then we'll adjust at Chelan Fresh. It's not the end of the world. Doing those spreadsheets and then adding these to them would not happen.
That's
Right,
not,
right.
and that's not what we're suggesting.
Right.
How much
Right.
details in behind each of these lines? Is that all the detail?
As far
what
as
I'm looking at right there is
no, there's materials. The materials
well,
detail.
the materials, but I'm looking at what the production line sees, what the dumper guys see. They see what product we want to dump to create that product. They see we want to put extra fancy 80 and 88s or whatever for these bags versus.
What you can have it.
So
You
I'm
can.
just looking at this. Just tells me what we're packing.
Right.
Doesn't tell me what we're dumping.
You can have finished goods as part of the bill of material. Can you not, Kathy, Pat?
Yeah, that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Decision. You know?
And those are the important things that have to be put into the SOP. And then we have to agree that what are the inputs and outputs, and then who's going to have responsibility for what elements, and how does it flow through time, and how do you handle the emergent or the exceptions? Those are all parts that have to be.
I mean, this piece here
Thought
would need
through.
to be reviewed by Wade and several others that
Yeah,
are
if
heavily
it's-
involved.
if it was going into here, if you're trying
to.
to inject this, clear it on the line level,
Right.
that's a whole nother.
And I think it's the right direction to go. When you're eating an elephant, though, you don't want to take small bites, right?
Exactly.
And so I guess that's my concern here, Stan. I don't understand the production planning process. You're
Right.
saying, oh, Doc, it's just this little,
Right.
take 5 minutes a day.
Right.
I think it's more than that.
Right.
Because we're looking for details down to the SKU level. What the raw products are. Obviously, the plan is what the finished products are.
Right.
So I think we want to pursue that, but we have to maybe do some more research
Yeah.
into
Meeting number 2.
what,
Absolutely.
because
again-
now it's a different set of personnel.
Yep.
And that's why I highly suggest we get a test environment, we get it set up, and we start modeling
Mhm.
how we think it's going to work, so we can bring people in and see how it really flows. How much is there enough detail? Too much? Not enough?
Or maybe, like we
In that
originally
laboratory.
discussed 10 minutes ago, we could get the bill of materials up and running before we attack the production plan. But
Mhm.
you know more about the production plan
Right.
than,
Right.
than we do.
Right.
And you're suggesting, well, why wouldn't you? So
I'm here listening and learning and
Yeah.
the reality of the situation and
Right.
etc. So
I guess my personal concern is trying to take on too much
Right.
at once.
we don't want to do that. We've done that before, apparently. No, this will be the last attempt at bill of materials. I guarantee it's either going to work or it's not. So I'm all for going slow. Nobody's climbing all over my back saying, "What the hell? What have you been doing here, Stan?" I'm waiting for that call, by the way. But the last thing in the world that we want to do is, frankly, screw up again.
Yeah.
There's no way we're going to do that.
Well, I'm all for taking a look at
Yep.
interjecting the production planning process, but I need to know more about
Okay.
it. But again, I don't really need to know it. Because it's Gathers is somewhat leading the charge here.
I just have a quick question. You maybe just answered it or whatever, but I ran the pre-size for a total of maybe 2 weeks of my life, and I got because I'm on the email list from Jared, something from Jared that went to Troy that came to me, and by the time it got to me, it didn't look like what Jared sent. It was literally a bunch of squares that was like had a size on the top, it had a grade on the left, and then it had like what I grouped together and what I don't group, like either sized out or grouped as 2.5.
Right.
That's all I saw when I ran that. And is that going to be taken and broken down into that? Is that what you asked?
No.
No. I
don't
thought
know
that's
if
what you
it was
were
Actually,
asking.
what you're saying is made me think of something else, and that's commit to pack,
Right.
which that's just like exactly what you're saying, where you're taking these grades and this size or whatever, and you're gonna pack this out of it. And
But they
You're
do,
really
we do
into
make
it.
changes to that. line,
well,
too.
you're into your instead of pre-size bins, you're talking orchard run bins, which have no identification as to what
Well, not
There's
yet. I
no
think they're
orchard
planning
run
to.
for premium yellow 80s. That's the pre-size bin. So I don't know how you would identify in there that I want to use this product to create this product, like you do now on the schedule.
Would the what we're doing at the receiving help with that at all? So when you do the receiving sample and it has that QC data for this, like a size sample and grade sample. I mean, it might help a little bit.
A little bit of projecting.
What you're saying, right? Like that's what we talked about before the meeting. I was telling you about A-line.
Mhm.
I don't really know enough about it to answer that at all. But it's just an orchard bin.
Right.
What's even in there,
Right.
right? What you're saying is that
Right.
production plan would have to say,
Well, I mean, you would
This-
have to have something to identify that I'm packing, let's say, a premium yellow 80
Yeah.
soft cell. What am I going to put? Or let's say a bag, because bags are much more variable as to what you put in them. You have to be able to say, okay, well, we want to put this product in. Well, on a tray pack line, you can say, well, I want to put a premium 80 pre-size bin. But on an orchard run, there's no
You get a
separation. You don't have all the different grades and sizes of an orchard run bin. When you have orchard run bin inventory, that's all you've got is just bins.
Here's the production plan right there.
This is packing instructions though for commit to back versus tray fill, which are very different.
And Givers gets the same thing as Chelan Fruit does. They're really not any different. And there is a lot of questions about, you mentioned bags. There's a lot of flexibility. We might throw 3 or 4 sizes and 2 different grades in a bag.
Mhm.
It's all the same end SKU. You have a lot of inputs coming into it. That's just one thing. I know with end-to-end with oranges, we know how to handle bins of oranges and SKUs coming out. There's probably something in there to figure out how to make a production schedule based on history of what they were doing over the course of a certain amount of time. You have, if you're going to pack 2,000 bins of oranges today, you're going to have a percentage of all of these items are
Size
going to come out the
ranges,
end.
grades.
So you're going to have 3 grades and 10 sizes. And,
The
can I say
kind of
something?
back to your question.
Yeah, can I add to my question?
Yeah.
I think what I was coming as I was trying to look down the list there, in the bottom left corner, the line production, warehouse packing line production.
Right.
If I'm the line manager, my production schedule, what I'm looking at, might not be anything. It might just be from Troy. Say he might be in my what's next
Right.
list. Maybe Troy takes the end-to-end production plan and makes it fit to his. Maybe that's part of his job now is to just take it, and maybe that's my job in the future. I don't know, but
I
make
think
it
the
fit
hope
my line.
is that this detailed plan here comes out of the system in a format that the line needs to be able to do their
Right,
job.
right.
So
Or
that it's
eliminate that.
structured and automated, so that the inputs you need because the only reason we do this is so that the line knows what to do based on this master plan and these requirements. So it's basically defining the rules or the logic, so that we have a schedule that says what and when. This is really how I'm going to do it at the very detailed level, and then it prints out in a format that you need to see, or it's even better than printing out. It's on a computer screen in a format that's maybe prioritized. So I can you just teach people, you look at the top line on the screen, and that's what you do. And then when you get that number, you go to the next line, or in a tray fill example.
You may not eliminate that step altogether, but you can minimize it. So there's information that we have here that sales want, like what lot numbers. You need that information for the pallet ticket creation. So a lot of that,
computer
what we do, or Troy does, or you do, is
it's just
for that additional
working
information.
down the line.
If we could all just put it
Just do
into the
next
same
thing, we
place,
get those
the
100
system,
boxes
Mhm.
to the next
and
one.
away we go.
And then if someone makes a change, the list may shuffle, and when I get to the next line, it may be a different line. Because someone else changed something.
Okay, now.
Dan,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
question, when Todd and Paul were talking about, seeing raw, fruit inventory, were they talking about, cause I know you asked the question, we can add that to the bill of materials, and the answer is yes.
Right.
But were they talking about it from an aspect of wanting to, have the ability to enter, I'm gonna dump X number of, or I plan to dump X number of bins today, that may convert to X amount of tray packs, and then, indicate what I'm gonna get out of those bins? I mean, divvy those up to kind of say, okay, now what am I gonna get out? X number of tray packs, X number of, bags, or what have you?
I'll let them answer.
Like the packing up generation screen that we've shown in the past?
So if you're talking about like on a tray line, we've got pre-sized bins in our inventory that we can use to create. So it's just another material you're using. On Orchard Run, you
Right.
have no identification as to what the product is you're going to get out until it goes across the sizer, and we know we're going to get premium yellows and greens and all these different grades and sizes. So we obviously have to be able to identify that when we pack this bag, we want to use these 3 grades and sizes to produce that. And it's going to be a matter of how do we get that product, Orchard Run product, in at that detail where we can identify a premium 80 versus a US Extra. That's the part I don't know. Just looking at this, how we do
This
this.
is kind of stock side.
Yeah.
What's the stock side that produces
Yeah,
this
that's-
finished goods
Right.
side?
Okay,
Because we do identify
that's
that
different
on the
than what I-
schedules.
okay, thanks.
How do you make this might be a dumb question, how do you make a production schedule for an orchard bin that you don't know what's in it? You just know it's a golden bin from this slot number.
We write the schedule based on what we hope to get out, and then as soon as I see, if I'm watching it, if I realize we're not getting any, say, yellow tray pack 80s, then I'm making an assumption that the fruit is all green. And I usually will call the line operator and ask them, what are you peaking on, color and size, grade? That tells me a lot. You can't do much to change that. But if you're, say you're intending to get yellow, but you could sub green, and maybe you have the greens going into an R2L instead of a tray pack, I would change the green over to a tray pack to help sub for the yellows you're not getting. And that'll happen a lot with, other things that we do, multiple grades or multiple sizes, and you're kind of guessing at what color you think it's going to be. And then you say, well, that's not working. I got to add in this, or go down to greens totally to make it work.
How many days ahead of the golden run? 1, 2 days? Do you make that production schedule?
Well,
Do you have time to look at the receiving data of the bins in that room? You probably don't have time.
no,
within-
and the thing, the lines don't even know. I'll call the line, and they know what the lot is and what it's producing on what they're running right then, and I'll ask them, well, what's the next 200 bins on the next lot? They need to go look, and that maybe look at paper or look at the bins physically.
So one thing we do, Michael, is Doug runs the numbers and he looks at historically, here's what we've made when we packed Goldens. So the first time we run Goldens in the year, there's not much data. But after a couple of months of running Goldens, we got a lot of data that says, gee, every time we run, we get this percentage of these sizes and grades.
So that's
And we
the
use that.
starting point.
We use that as kind of best fit what we think we're going to get.
Okay.
But to Paul's point, you get the finished product and not necessarily the work in process.
Exactly, it's
Yeah,
what was
what
packed,
was-
not.
yes.
Bags.
Right.
Okay. I'm not as much. Obviously, I've worked some summers with cherries, and cherries. Johnny and Troy and them tell me, or you guys say, whatever, and so I go to the receiving data that's coming in, email after email, and I look at the size profiles and the coal rate, and then hopefully I can plan ahead to open more lanes for this or that.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's different than apples, and I don't have a lot of experience in apples. That's why I'm asking these pretty basic questions.
So that's pretty similar.
Okay.
But that's how Kenny sets it initially. Is he looks at the data
Right.
from
Yeah.
Doug.
Yeah.
Historically, this is kind of what we're getting, and then based on customer need and urgency, he prioritizes
And that would be that, not the master schedule, but that second
the
box that's
detail.
dotted, the
Right.
detail. And then it would be given to a line in the form of a line production. They can see this is how I'm going to use that.
Right.
Are we doing this for cherries too? Is the plan that we open all of this up for cherries?
And the answer would be, why not? Yeah. Yes.
Scheduling on it is even more
Right.
And
volatile.
Easier, right? There's only 3 SKUs in cherries.
none of this comes without pain.
Well, it actually, in a lot of ways, it would be easier to do with cherries than apples because the plans are much simpler, and there's a lot less variability. That's one of the reasons why, when you go to Sunkist and you look at oranges, they have a lot less variability, a lot fewer SKUs, and it was designed and worked well with the processes. So it's more cherry-like. They also do lemons, which are more apple-like. They have more grades and sizes and storage going on in it, and so it'll work with both, but different rule set. And it really comes down to time fences. So as you get your processes written down, you can start to develop timelines and say, okay, by this time these things have to be done for an apple schedule, say. For a cherry schedule, that timeline might be very different because of the pace and the lack of complexity that happens.
Well, at this point, it sounds like we've got enough new questions, concerns, direction, or whatever to take a step back, rethink a little bit of what we're intending to do here, and then get together with Sam and see what we can actually get signed off on, I guess, for lack of a better word.
So, just as a matter of a process check, Todd, how do you think we should move this forward? I'm assuming at some point you're going to want to get Reggie's support of the activity. Is it something that we want to try to run? I mean, in the past, what we've done is we've taken these systems, kind of bigger enterprise-wide things, and we've run them through CFM and to the board there.
Mhm.
That way, you get Cass and Reggie in a room and they can talk through it. Do you think we should continue to use that format or forum, or do you think we should do something separate?
If you've got that methodology instilled in the group, why not continue down that path?
Right, I just want to get
No, I would agree.
okay.
I mean, I will talk with Reggie and anyone else at Chelan Fruit that needs to be informed or wants to be involved. But it also needs to have the Chelan Fresh seal of approval.
Well, and again, to me, the beauty of the Chelan Fresh is you've got all of those decision makers in one room,
Mhm.
and you can kind of do the education, get to the decisions, and then get them to buy off on the decisions
Mhm.
to enable moving forward with some of this, because it does require. You got to have all the detail guys that know the guts to work the guts, but you got to have the big bosses kind of shaking their heads that we're gonna bite this chunk off and try it.
Right. And that's the only advice I would offer is put it in, McNugget size. I mean, I understand you want to have the overview of the whole ERP, but I wouldn't spend more than 5 minutes on it. And just say, here's the one item or the 2 items we want to focus on now, and here's the benefits.
You should have seen Sam's room yesterday. This is the McNugget size. He called up and says, "Can you guys come up? Can you guys come up? I have stuff plastered all over my wall, and
You need to weed that one
Couldn't see
out
anything.
before you feed it to our
the-
guy.
You can remember the audience you were talking to. I mean, that was great for today.
Or if you're gonna feed that to him, could we be in another room and watch through a window?
The only thing better than feeding it to him is getting him and Mac together and doing
Mm-hmm.
it.
It's even better.
I won't be there for that one."
Come on.
Does Uncle Mac's gum in those meetings turn to powder like the basketball games? I was a manager at a basketball game once, and Johnny's oldest son was playing. My dad was coaching, and it was literally this Trinidad gum was powder coming out. He was munching it so hard.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I've never saw it just like.
So that competitive juice.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any other questions or comments or concerns? Or
Is there anything you would like us to do in the meantime?
keep an open mind and do what you're doing. At this point, I haven't gotten any pushback from anybody. I mean, I realize again that none of this comes without pain. None of it.
Do you want a list of people for this part of it? that
Sure.
you would email?
Absolutely.
I'll
Absolutely.
I'll talk to Lady by handbrake and find out who the different one.
Okay.
So trying to keep it to how many people from each
Right.
place maximum do you want? Because I know obviously you've got limited.
I think 12 total people is more than
3
enough for
from
any.
each?
Sure.
2 or 3 from each
Yeah,
place
yeah.
at the most.
More is good, but too much is too much. Yeah. So,
All right.
thank you all very, very much.
you.
Appreciate it. Kathy, I'm sorry. Did you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns?
With some of your input from last week.
I don't think right now, I think we're good.
All right. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk to you in a bit.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for coming up, Ken.
Ken, you're not crying.
This can either be a disaster or it can be a hell of a big help.
It's not. I can guarantee it won't be a disaster.
I'm going to focus
And
on
if nothing no other reason that we're going to go slow rather than fast. You know, we're taking off McNugget. I like that McNugget size.
I'll focus on the good
I
side.
can maybe just really quick see if you can
Yeah.
Whatever the right speed.
Or if you want,
Yeah.
do you have like a spreadsheet?
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
Ken, you heading back right now?
You guys want to get lunch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
The super shop.
Okay.
So you're gonna have to
And
do
then I
the
try
super
to
shop.
keep.
The bakery
I use
is closing out.
I use Costco.
All right. Ken?
COS.
Super stop?
I use the COS.
Okay.
Same in a different.
Meet you guys there.
Like bags.
We'll make Missy buy today.
I was trying to move out.
I'll get together with you.
You haven't met Kaylee?
No, it's a pleasure to meet
Oh,
you.
Kaylee? No, we've met before. You have? Yes. Oh.
I
You
met.
said 2.
I know. I met Mike. Well, I didn't know her last name now.